episode of the Growth Catalyst podcast, I was joined by Garry Ridge, who is the ex-CEO of WD-40, now an author, coach and chairman. I was blown away that he agreed to have a conversation with me, and I won't pretend that I wasn't nervous, even a little starstruck, which of course is healthy for me. But it screams volumes about the type of person that Garry is. Despite his significant success, he remains humble and curious. He has a heart of gold and a spine of steel. He was a leader that took a business from 300 million to 3 billion and expanded into over 170 countries. If you haven't read any of his work, I would urge you to go and dig it out. He explains what being a dumbass is. It's not negative. It's an amazing framing on how to be a servant leader. Garry is the epitome of someone with a growth mindset. He is always learning. In fact, when he took on the role as CEO at WD-40, he also signed up to do a master's. Garry shares how he decided that the brand needed to have the ability to share emotions and stories. Who doesn't have a can of WD-40 at home? Did you know how the name WD-40 came into existence? I'll let Garry tell you that. It's beautiful. Garry shares the same philosophy that we have here at Zockery, that strategy multiplied by culture equals success. Even the world's greatest strategy will fail if only 30% of your people are engaged. I know you'll enjoy this episode, so please subscribe and like. I hope that every business leader gets to listen to what Garry has to say. Thank you. Garry, thank you so much for taking some time out to talk to me today.
G'day, Collette. It's great to be with you. Thanks for inviting me along.
Thank you. I'm delighted. I'm really excited to unpack this. So we are going to talk about culture and obviously how important it is, but how important it is to make sure that your culture is aligned to your company's strategy. That's what I'm really excited to get into the weeds of. For our listeners, most people probably understand who you are, but could you give us a brief introduction of who you are and how you've got here?
Well, thank you. Yeah. I'm currently the refired, and I don't use the word retired. I've refired from my day job. I was for 25 years the CEO and then chairman of WD-40 company, and many of you will know that little blue and yellow can with a little red top. Now I coach CEOs, and I speak on culture around the world, and then I'm on a couple of other boards. But really, my purpose is I help leaders build cultures of belonging where love, forgiveness, and learning inspire a happier, more connected world. And the reason I do that is I believe business has a responsibility and to make the world a better place by doing what we're talking about today. And that's building cultures where people go to work every day, they make a contribution to something bigger than themselves, they learn something new, they're protected and set free by a compelling set of values, and they go home happy. So 25 years of scar tissue. So I want to share that.
Amazing. Thank you. So what would you say your area of expertise is?
Dumbassery. I am the dean of dumbassery. And why I say that is that, I believe that leaders, their biggest strength is the understanding that their job is to bring out the best of others. And in doing that, they have to realize that they don't necessarily have all the answers. And that's certainly my point, is that, the three most powerful words that I learned in my life were I don't know, and getting very comfortable with those three words.
Okay. So you've written a number of books, the most recent being Any Dumbass Can Do It. So do you want to explain why you called it that?
Yeah, of course. Well, the word ASS in the title of my book is not referencing anybody's bottom or posterior. It's referencing a donkey. And, I'm an Australian. My country of origin is Australia, and a dumbass in Australia is a donkey. And the reason that I named it that, well, one, the title does get an attention, but there's something behind that. Donkeys get a bad rap. People think they're just stubborn or slow, but there's truth behind them. Donkeys are steady. They keep going long after others give up. They're loyal companions. You can count on them when the road gets rough. They're practical, not necessarily flashy. They know how to conserve energy and get the job done. And while they not might not always be the ones that rush into things, that caution often keeps them safe. So when I say any dumbass can do it, what I really mean is this. You don't have to be brilliant to be a great leader. You just need a bit of courage, a lot of care, and the humility to keep learning. Because, like the donkey, leadership isn't about showing off. It's about carrying the load, sticking with the journey, and helping others get where they need to go.
Agree with that philosophy anymore. So, so what compelled you to write this particular book?
Well, I had 25 years of learning, and it really is the platform for me to share that culture in an organization is truly a competitive advantage. But a lot of people think culture is the soft stuff, and it's not the soft stuff. And the facts tell us that. When you think about it, Gallup's research tells us that about 70% of people who go to work every day are either disengaged or actively disengaged, which means we're only getting 30% of the value and the talent out of our people. So, if we can create a culture where a, a high number of people are going to work every day, enthusiastically and passionately executing against the strategy, then we're going to have an organization that not only sends people home happy and therefore is making a positive difference to their life, but the organization itself performs exceptionally well. And there's so much research out there that really does share that organizations that have strong cultures perform better than organizations that don't. It's just that leaders are not brave enough to be able to build the culture because it takes time to do it. Culture is not a microwavable event. It's a crockpot approach.
Absolutely. Okay, so before we dig a little further into that, could you explain what drew you to this area? How have you ended up being such a proponent for culture, for company culture?
Well, it goes back to when I was given the opportunity to lead WD-40 company in 1997. I'd already been with the company 10 years. I started in Australia, moved to the US in 1994. And in 1997, I was given the opportunity to lead as CEO. And our goal was to take the blue and yellow can with a little red top to the world. The brand was a fairly well-established brand in the US, and it had sprinkles in other countries around the world. But we were convinced that there was a global market. And we knew how to identify market potential. We knew how to make end users aware, and we knew how to make the product easy to buy. That was fine. The thing that was always on my mind was, how do we build cultures where, now that the sun was never going to set on the brand, people anywhere in the world at any time during the day could make decisions and not get caught up in the churn of hierarchy within an organization, which is really the negative culture. I didn't know how to do that. I really, it was really something that was, bugging me, and how do we do that? And in fact, I was on a Qantas 747. I was flying from Los Angeles to Sydney. I was at 38,000 feet over the South Pacific Ocean at 2 a.m. in the morning. And as you do, you take stuff with you to read. And I read a quote from the Dalai Lama, which was, "Our purpose in life is to make people happy. If we can't make them happy, at least don't hurt them." And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. How could we do that in business? I then read a quote from Aristotle, who was born in 384 BC, and he says, "Pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work." And I thought, well, duh, of course. If you really enjoy what you're doing, you're going to do it better than if you don't enjoy what you're doing. So these things are kind of churning in my mind. How do you do that? I got back to San Diego after my trip down to Australia, and I was reading an article in the local paper about a master's degree in leadership at the University of San Diego. And it was a program that was developed by Dr. Ken Blanchard, who is the guru of servant leadership, and the university. And so I went to an information session, and Ken said, most leaders only think about the head. We got to start thinking about the heart, because it's the head and the heart together that creates the passion to do great work. And I thought that's so true. So I'm now CEO of a US public company. I enrolled and I went back to school. I did a 2 years master's degree in leadership, and Ken was one of my professors. And subsequently, we wrote a book together called Helping People Win at Work. And he became probably my key mentor in life. He's 86 years old now. He lives close and I see him often. And that's where I learned the power of servant leadership. And it was that learning experience that really gave me the confidence to execute around the elements that you need to have in place to build great cultures. And if you build great cultures and you've got a reasonable strategy, you'll be much more successful than if you have just a great strategy and a crappy culture.
Here's something different. Strategic consulting, where the consultant actually shares your risk. At Zockery, we make profit when you achieve breakthrough growth. We are that confident in our methodology. Check out Zockery.com. Such a powerful story. I mean, it's the epitome of growth-minded behaviour. So you've become the CEO of a huge organisation, and you obviously take it on to even better, further global expansion, and yet you sign yourself up to educate yourself further. Is there something in your character? What is it that made you do that?
I'm naturally very curious, but I went back to school because I wanted to confirm what I thought I knew and learn what I didn't know. And learning, to me, the number one responsibility of a leader is to be a learner and a teacher. We as leaders need to be continually learning, and then we need to be continually teaching those we have the privilege to lead so they can step into a better version of themselves. So I guess I was naturally curious, but I was intrigued, and I thought, there was a great opportunity to make a difference if we could build great organizations, because I'd seen people, not necessarily where we were in the company, because our culture wasn't that bad. But I've seen people whose lives were destroyed because, they went home of an evening and sat around the dinner table and they're saying, I hate my job. I don't like what I'm doing. Their kids are sitting around. They're going, well, geez, I don't want to do I ever want to do that? No. And so I think, again, it was a calling that gave me the opportunity to prove that you could build organizations where people made a difference and they went home happy.
I personally, I don't. You won't be aware of this, but you probably have some of these stories in the organisation when you were there. So the WD-40 brand for me is a lovely, familiar, gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling, which sounds ridiculous because when I left home, my dad said you basically take a screwdriver, some WD-40 and a hammer, pop it in your car, and that's your DIY kit. So, my dad's no longer with me or with us, but so I just have this really nice feel-good factor around a brand which is a spray oil, which I guess you probably hear stories like that all the time.
I'm glad you said that, because our purpose statement was not to stop squeaks, but our purpose statement was we exist to create positive, lasting memories, solving problems in factories, homes, and workshops around the world. We solve problems and we create opportunities. And what you just did was you shared your positive, lasting memory of the brand, which means that we did meet our purpose to you. And I think, again, that a lot of organizations get confused that their purpose is what their product does, like stop a squeak. No, our purpose was, what does our product deliver? And it was positive, lasting memory. So if you asked me, what business we were in, I'd say, oh, I'm in the memories business. Now, another reason that was really strong was our values in our organization. Our first value was we value doing the right thing. Our second value was we value creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships. And those relationships meant our customers and our end users, the people that we dealt with every day, the communities that we lived in, Mother Nature, who gave us the opportunity to survive in what we did, and even, even our competitors. So we could always ask ourselves the question, will this create a positive, lasting memory? If we were doing product development, we'd say, let's make sure we understand how this new delivery system will create a positive, lasting memory. And if we couldn't prove that, we wouldn't do it.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's dig in a little further then. So obviously, you consult with lots of organisations these days. So what are the core skills and knowledge areas that you draw on the most to work with these organisations?
Well, if I talk about foundationally first, let's talk about the foundations that need to be in place in an organization to build a great culture. And this is simple, it's not easy, and time is not your friend. So firstly, there are some fundamentals that need to be in place. And the first one is belonging. Do people in your organization know and feel like, and are they treated like they belong? Now, if you think about Maslow's hierarchy to self-actualization, the first two rungs are, can I survive? Am I secure? Is there, the ability for me to feed my family and be safe? The third rung is love and belonging. And most organizations don't create organizations where people know, feel, and treated like they belong. The second thing is the work that I do recognized, and can I see how it makes a difference and that I matter in the organization? So again, satisfaction that the work I do matters. The third one is, am I safe? And that means psychological safety. And Amy Edmondson does a lot of work on psychological safety. But psychological safety is have we reduced fear in the organization? And we did that by saying we don't make mistakes, we have learning moments. And are we allowing people to share what works and what doesn't work? So do I feel psychologically safe? And the last one is, am I being coached, not managed? This is one of the things in organizations that really get up my nose is the word manager. You don't manage people. In fact, in good English dictionaries, the word manager means manipulator. So, and that's not true. You're here to coach people as a leader, and a great coach is there to help the player play a better game. So, belonging, do I matter? Is there psychological safety? And am I being coached as by my leader, not someone trying to manage me?
So that all makes sense to me. It echoes everything that I do as a coach. Do you do you think these things are easy to measure?
Well, employee engagement is easy to measure.
Yep.
And these are just ingredients to do that. We measured employee engagement annually and even more than annually at WD-40 company. And, we had a 93% employee engagement. And that's, when you think about the average is 30, 93% is pretty high. But, we used to questions like, I love to tell people I work at the company. 99% of our employees globally said they did. I understand how my job contributes to achieving the company's goals. 98% of people said they knew that how they contributed, which means they knew their work mattered. I know what results are expected of me. 98%. I respect my coach. 98% of people in the company said they respect their coach. Now let's just translate that for a minute. In normal terms, the coach is the boss, and most people leave their organizations because they don't align with their boss or their manager. This word is respect. And when we asked, why do you respect your coach? The feedback was very clear, because the coach is here to help me win. And then, I feel my values and opinions are a good fit with the company, 98%. So yeah, we measured this on a regular basis to be able to see that the work we're doing and the way we were treating people was really making a difference.
So you said these are easy, but or they're simple but not easy to execute on. So what was it like for you to roll this out? How long did it take? Were you dealing with a broken culture to start with, or were you you were learning and then you were deciding to implement inside of the organization? What was the process like?
Well, the culture wasn't broken. It just wasn't going to take us where we wanted to go, because we were more insular than we needed to be. We needed to be, a global organization. So you have to have the elements in place. Firstly, is those four things I talked about. But are you committed to the fact that people matter in the organization? Do you have a clearly defined and authentic purpose? I shared with you our purpose. Do you have a hierarchical set of values? These are the values that help people make decisions every day. Then we get into what I call the typhoon zone in an organization, which is strategy and execution. And the reason I call it the typhoon zone is most leaders spend a disproportionate amount of their time on strategy and execution without putting the foundation together, which is the culture that maximizes the execution of the strategy. And let me put it in a simple algorithm for you. Let's write a really lovely strategic plan. We write a nice strategic plan. We'll take it across to some smart university and they'll say, congratulations, Garry and Collette, 70 out of 100 for your strategic plan. Beautiful. Okay. But if only 30% of your people are going to work every day and passionately executing against that strategic plan, you're getting 30% of the value. But if 90% of your people are going to work and executing against that strategic plan, you're getting 90% of the value of the plan. Oh, duh. So success equals the will of the people, which is the culture, times the strategy. So the will of the people times the strategy equals success. And that's really the formula that's in place. And again, this takes time. I mean, culture is values plus behavior times consistency. And unfortunately, a lot of leaders think that you can sprinkle fairy dust over an organization and change the culture and everything's going to be okay. No, not going to happen. You've got to continually work the culture. When I was in high school back in Australia many years ago, my science teacher gave me a petri dish and they said, we're going to grow culture in this petri dish. So what do you have to know? You have to know the ingredients to put in the petri dish. And then you, as the scientist or the leader owning that petri dish, your role is to continually feed the good ingredients so they grow and prosper and be brave enough to attack the toxins when they enter the petri dish, because if you don't, they'll kill the culture like that. And unfortunately, that's where most leaders fall down, because this job is about consistency. You've got to be brave enough to attack the toxins, and you've got to be brave enough to feed the good ingredients on a consistent daily basis.
Yeah. So Matt Roberts, the co-founder here at Zockery, he talks about compounding advantage, that very what's the word I'm looking for? Mathematical equation. So yeah, it's so you optimize two things. Obviously, it's the people, so with the time and what the prioritized list of what it is that you're going to work on, and it's compounding, so it's constantly multiplied, which makes complete sense. And then he talks about antibodies. I think it's the same sentiment. So when there are bad things and bad behaviors inside the organization, you've got to be brave enough to weed it out. But sometimes we see that they could be your star performers that have isolated themselves because they have a certain way of doing things. How do you try and manage that kind of behavior with the people inside of that organization?
Well, the star performer who is not living the company's values is cancer, because everybody in the organization says, if I'm getting my numbers, I can be the a-hole in the company. I can be the jerk. And, that's why I have this. This is, Alec, the soul-sucking CEO of Fear Incorporated. And I talk about Alec in my book. And Alec has some behavior in an organization that creates toxic culture. His ego eats his empathy instead of his empathy eating his ego. Now, I'm saying this could also be Alice. They're a micromanager. They want to put their fingers in everything. They think they're corporate royalty. They want a fear-based culture. They're a master of control. They're a know-it-all. They have all the answers, even the wrong ones. They don't value learning. They must always be right. They hate feedback, and they don't keep their commitments. And if you have someone like that in your organization, that's toxin. And you are never going to build a great culture in an organization if that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if it's allowed and it's given oxygen and air to grow and evolve, because that just says to everybody else, actually, it doesn't matter. We're not living by the values that we've laid out. This behaviour is
Well,
allowed to grow.
what we do is we protect our own comfort zone at the expense of other people's development or the organization's success. That's our leadership problem. We're protecting ourselves because we don't want to make those, if you will, tough decisions, or I call them redirections. You see, I don't think most people get up in the morning and put their hand up and say, today I'm going to be Alec or Alice, the soul sucking leader. And this is what I've found in my coaching work. When we make people aware of the behavior that they have and how it impacts others, and then there's intention around changing that behavior, the whole thing changes. So I think, again, we need to be aware of how what we do impacts others.
Yeah, great. So that's obviously that's a more difficult thing to tackle if one of your superstars is behaving, it could be the sales superstar behaving like this. What are the other hard to do things that leaders could be sort of focusing on and thinking about?
I mean, what are we doing to be the best person we possibly can be for the people we actually want to lead? We have no right to take our leftovers to people. And what I mean by that, as a leader, we need to recenter ourselves. We could be in a meeting or in some sort of conversation or some sort of environment, and it impacts us in certain ways. And, we may come out of that environment not our full plate of ourselves. What we need to do is refill our plate before we go to visit the next person or the next meeting. And it's interesting. I have this, little notebook that I carry around. I've been carrying it around for years. Well, not the same one, but something similar. And I have a little placard on here, and it says, "Am I being the person I want to be right now?" And then the question I ask myself is, who is that person? And I must have looked at this 1,000 times, and it reminds me of who I want to be when I think I am my best. And it says, I want to be grateful. I want to be caring. I want to be empathetic. I want to be reasonable. I want to be a listener. I want to be fact-based. I want to have a balanced opinion. I want to be curious. I want to be a learner, and I want to throw sunshine, not a shadow. And, often I've been in situations and I've looked at this and go, okay, I'm moving on to the next environment. I want to be this person. I don't want to go into this meeting and not be a listener because I was frustrated at the last meeting. I don't want to go into this meeting and not be caring and empathetic because at the last meeting someone, got up my nose and pissed me off. I want to recenter myself so I can be the person I want to be and take my full plate, not my leftovers.
Yeah. Do you think anybody ever underestimated you?
Underestimated me? I don't even know how to answer that question.
So you're showing these values, you're giving air and space to everybody, which is perhaps, certainly back in the mid-90s, we're still coming through workplace evolution and bad workplace behaviour. We still see it today. Do you think people might have underestimated what you were trying to achieve through your behaviour?
Yeah, I think I don't know if they underestimated, but I'm sure at some periods of time they said, I think he's been drinking too much of Ken Blanchard's Kool-Aid. But, I guess here's the difference is that I was very clear that leadership is a balance between being tough-minded and tender-hearted. You have to have a heart of gold and a backbone of steel. So, an organization, sometimes when people talk about cultures, they think it's the soft stuff. This is not soft. This is hard. If it was soft, we wouldn't have that horrible employee engagement number of 30%. It's hard because you're dealing with people, but you've got to get that balance. It's not about popcorn, pizzas, and margarita parties. It's a balance between having a great strategy and then are you balanced between being tough-minded and tender-hearted? And if you're either end of that scale, you're in trouble because, tender-hearted, you're not brave enough, tough-minded, you're this person, so.
Yeah, so just contextualize. I think that's what I was trying to understand. If people don't quite recognize the behaviors inside of an office because they're potentially a different generation or whatever, actually, how do people respond to it when you were starting to change the organization?
Yeah. I think again, when at the beginning they may have thought, well, is this really going to work? I remember in the early days when I would go to board meetings, and now I'm talking, in the early 2000s, and I'm talking to my board of directors about culture. They didn't get it. And worse, even when I went to Wall Street, I'd go to Wall Street and talk to investors, and I'd be there, and the first few pages of my investor presentation was talking about culture and how we have to build culture in the organization to really, maximize and amplify the execution of our strategy. And they couldn't wait for me to get to page 6 that just had the numbers on it. But now, in the last 5 years, and particularly, after COVID, suddenly people are talking about, well, culture's important. Culture in organizations drives success, which is absolutely true. So I think we've gone through a changing age where culture now is seen to be important and not just the soft stuff. And we proved, we had an organization that had a compounded annual growth rate of total shareholder return of 15% a year. We took the brand to 176 countries. We 6x'd the revenue over that period of time. So it wasn't that we were just building this really nice place to go where we didn't produce results. We took our market cap from 300 million to over $3 billion. And the culture was a huge amplifier of that effort. We had a reasonable strategy, but we had a very, very strong culture.
Was there a moment in that journey where obviously you're constantly growing and evolving and learning, but was there a moment where you just realized that you had got this right?
Yeah, there was. It was January 2021, believe it or not, 1 year into COVID. We'd done our employee opinion survey in the March of 2020, just before COVID hit. And our numbers came out just as high as they'd ever been. In the following year, as we changed the way we operated, we went to a global, virtual, at a lot of times, organization. We did a lot of things to ensure that we were still showing people that and treating them like they belong, showing them and treating them that they matter, coaching them and keeping them safe. But in January 2021, I said to our leadership team, I need us to go out and just do a pulse check and make sure we haven't drained any of our what I would call cultural equity. So we went out and we did a pulse survey and measured, and the numbers came back, and they were pretty much in line with what they were in March the year before, except for one number, and this number went up. And basically the question was, are you excited about your place and the company's future? And it went to 97% of our people globally said they were comfortable about their place in the company's future. And I said, that can't be right. If this is January 2021, COVID is, running wild around the world. There's no real evidence yet that we're going to have a vaccine or how can people feel that way? Go and check the data. It's something you've miscalculated. They came back and said, no, it's right. So then we went and I said, okay, I got to find out why. So we went and asked why. And the answer was pretty cool. I feel safe, is what the people said. If I need to be anywhere right now, I want to be here because we're living our just cause of a group of people that come together to protect and feed each other. And for me, that was mic drop. I said, you know what? We've proven it. And I even get goosebumps now when I talk about it because we proved it.
Yeah. That's really profound. Wow. Thank you. So obviously you've written the book, so there's guidance and frameworks and examples in the book. If you had time with a young upstart, potential Garry 25 years ago, someone today, what advice would you give them if you had 10, 15 minutes with brand spanking new CEO who is just beginning on their journey? What would you guide them? What would you tell them to think about, go implement?
Well, number one, I'd say, to be a great leader, you've got to love and involve your people. You've got to be people centered. You've got to always be in servant leadership mode. Be under no misunderstanding. You're there to serve those you have the privilege to lead. You're expected to be competent, and you better continue learning. And because your job is to be a learner and a teacher, you need to be connected with your people. You need to spend a lot of time in the stinky locker room, as I call it, because that's where you build trust. You're not corporate royalty. You've got to love learning moments. Remember, though, you're going to have a heart of gold and a backbone of steel. Always be a champion of hope. Understand that micromanagement is not scalable. You cannot micromanage. That's not scalable. You need to do what you say you're going to do, and you need to treasure and seek feedback from everyone in the organization. And if you do those things, you'll set yourself up to be a great leader in the organization, and you'll set the example for others in the organization.
Just thinking about what's going on in the world, what do you see are the most pressing challenges, either for yourself and your own business right now, or some of the clients that you're working with?
Loneliness and isolation. One of the things that I think has happened due to COVID is we have tipped the scale of virtual working too far. There is no doubt in my mind that we can work virtually, but we have to bring people together for what I call meaningful proximity, meaningful work, so that we build those personal relationships. So yeah, sure, we can work remotely, but what are we doing to bring people together to do meaningful work together to build those relationships? So I think that's the change. Leaders need to think about this. Collette's running out the door in the morning, and she gives her husband, wife, or significant other a high five and says, I am so excited to go to fill in the blank today because we are going to fill in the blank. What are the two fill in the blanks? To bring people together, to build relationships, to do meaningful strategic work. And I call it meaningful proximity, not just going to an office to sit behind a computer. We know we can do that from anywhere. The other thing I think that's interesting is we need to think about, AI. And one of the biggest negative feedbacks I got when I was a leader is we don't have enough time. And AI can give us time. So how are we going to repurpose time so it can do the stuff that's boring and we can now work on the stuff that's fun? So, it's not about, AI is going to take jobs. AI is going to reposition us as humans because it can't get your heart. It can only get your head.
Great advice. Okay, so is there something that organizations could go and do immediately?
Yeah, go to my website, www.thelearningmoment.net, and take the dumbass quiz. And once you take the quiz, you'll get your dumbass score. And the higher your score, the more chance you have of building a great culture. The lower the score is, the more work you need to do. And yeah, start looking at who you are as a leader.
And just sort of digging a little bit more deeply into the culture underpinning strategy. So again, any advice for leaders when they're actually trying to make sure that everyone understands their place in helping deliver on company goals and strategy?
Well, most people let people down because there's not a clarity around what we expect from each other. In the book that I wrote with Ken Blanchard, it's called Helping People Win at Work. And the byline is, don't mark my paper, help me get an A. So my challenge to leaders is, are the people in your organization clear about what an A looks like? What do you expect me to do? To what standard do you expect me to do it? And when do I am expected to deliver it? And we let people down because we aren't clear about what we expect from each other, and that leads to conflict. That's where those, uncomfortable conversations, and I call it the na disease in organizations. It's the finger pointing disease. And in fact, we developed something in the company that's pretty cool. We called it the Maniac Pledge. And it's the antidote or the vaccine against the na disease. And here's what it says. It says, I am responsible for taking action, asking questions, getting answers, and making decisions. I won't wait for someone to tell me. If I need to know, I am responsible for asking. I have no right to be offended that I didn't get this sooner. And if I'm doing something others should know about, I am responsible for telling them. And this pledge that we all had and we all lived by really put the responsibility at our feet, so we couldn't go finger pointing at other people because we didn't know or we weren't told.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So what could leaders be asking of their teams?
I think what I'm going to reverse that. What should teams be asking of their leaders?
Okay.
And they should be asking for, what is our clearly defined purpose in an organization? What are our values? How are we going to make decisions in our organization? Um, how do we respect, and do we have a people first culture? And then is our strategy clearly defined and the execution expectations clearly defined? And then are we going to have an organization where we've reduced fear by having what we call learning moments? And a learning moment is a positive or negative outcome of any situation that needs to be openly and freely shared to benefit all people. And I'll give you a beautiful example of why that learning moment philosophy works. Back in 1953 in San Diego, California, there was a fledgling company called Rocket Chemical Company. Rocket Chemical Company was in the business of making products for the space and aviation industry. There was a problem with condensation and corrosion in the umbilical cord of the Atlas space rocket. The chemists got together and started to formulate a solution for that, to solve that problem. Solution 1 didn't work, 5 didn't work, 15 didn't work, 20 didn't work, 25 didn't work, 35 didn't work, 39 didn't work, 40 worked. WD, water displacement 40 formula, was born from 39 learning moments. So, using what people would call failures as platforms and steps to learning lead to some remarkable outcomes.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for sharing that story. Are there things that our listeners could be preparing for in the coming 12 months that sort of come to mind for you?
Well, I think it goes back to, again, you should be preparing at all times around what is it we need to learn? What don't we know? Are we being curious enough? Are we caring with our people? Are we being candid with our people? I believe most people in organizations don't lie. They fake and they hide. So have an organization where there's no lying, faking, or hiding. Do we know what we're going to hold each other accountable for, and are we going to be brave enough to do that? So, we're in a. I think that uncertainty, you know, is the most certain leaders are the ones who sit comfortably in uncertainty, and we are in a time of uncertainty. And I don't think we've ever not been in a time of uncertainty. And I was at a conference a few weeks ago, and we were talking about the word maybe. And maybe isn't indecisions. It's what I call intelligent patience, because it gives you that time to say, well, maybe this and maybe that. And let's be patient about how we're going to intelligently maneuver ourselves in a time of uncertainty.
Okay, thank you. Um, is there anything else that I should have asked you that you would have liked to have shared with our listeners?
Well, we've covered up on a lot of things, I think, and it's been a really, great conversation to do that. But I think it gets back to, success is the will of the people, time strategy, and strategy without people will will just be paperwork. Culture is the multiplier.
Absolutely. As you're aware, I've written a little book about bad managerial behaviour. As you quite rightly point out, it's not a gender thing, not an age thing. We all you can understand how we can behave badly on occasion, and it's really easy to get horror stories out of people. Everybody will say, "Oh, this is one person that did this one thing that really affected me." I'm trying to find the other side of that. Who inspired Garry? Was there a person or a moment that they said something or did something that just potentially changed the course of your career direction?
I think there were many, and I talk about a lot of them in my book, whether it be in my younger days in Australia, working at a hardware store or a sporting goods store, and the people that lessons I learned from that. But I think the three main influences were the quote I read from the Dalai Lama, the words of Aristotle, and the mentoring and teaching of Dr. Ken Blanchard.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time and talking with me today. I was really excited about it, and I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today, Garry.
Well, thank you. And thank you for doing what you do, because it's through your work like this we can get a message out there that we can help the world be a better place, and we need to do that. So you're the hero in this conversation.